hour on, got it, on creating effective teams. So we're going to be providing you with some lightning talks from some incredible thought leaders. Each section will be around 10 minutes and we aim to finish within the hour. So we aim to provide you with plenty of food for thought today. It's going to be myself, Nichola Adams, discussing on how ergonomics optimizes resourcefulness, followed by Susan Hunt, discussing the power of the collective, Mindy Gibbins-Klein, discussing thought leadership, Jane Piper on hybrid working, and all wrapped up with Kate Faragher with maybe what we all try and avoid, but no more, how to have difficult conversations. Please do put any questions in the chat and we'll try and answer as we go along, or if we have time at the end. So I'm starting off here, how ergonomics optimizes resourcefulness. So I've got a master's in health ergonomics, and I also trained in the biopsychosocial approach for dealing with pain. I'm the founder of Inspired Ergonomics, a consultancy where we specialize in preventing and reducing back pain in the workplace. I work a lot with corporate clients nationwide and globally, from charities to law firms, universities, news publishers, a whole range. So just to quickly give you a background on what ergonomics is, as there's often a bit of a misunderstanding around the depth of it. It's a very multidisciplinary science that includes biomechanics, anthropometrics, which are measurements, and psychology. This enables us to find solutions which are key to each individual, not just generically. Ergonomics is about designing products and services that make things a joy to use by all, from website to work processes. So we specialize in advising on the design of the workplace and helping people with their workstation setups in the form of an online tool, one-to-one advisory services, both remotely for home workers and in person now too for in-office assessments. We'd also do workshops, training sessions, videos, and educational materials. Our aim with all of this is to empower your employees to improve their resourcefulness when looking after their physical health, and we do that through this educational approach. Looking after your employees' physical well-being is, of course, common sense, because back pain is one of the biggest causes of sick leave, along with stress, and of course the two are interrelated. If you have back pain, you're probably going to be stressed. If you're stressed, the first thing you do is hunch up and cause attention. All of this affects productivity levels, sick leave, absenteeism rates, and turnover. And of course, for an individual to be able to work at their full potential and be an optimal part of a team, their mind needs to be free of pain. So this is actually also why there is a Health and Safety Executive Act that requires all employers to look after their employees with an ergonomic program delivered to wherever they are permanently working. And for a hybrid way of working, this includes addressing both the home and office working environments. COVID, of course, has put a much sharper focus on looking after the whole person. People, of course, are your greatest assets, and choosing just to pay lip service to their well-being no longer works. We can no longer escape the personal challenges employees face and the potential impact on their work. So being proactive in looking after their well-being will not only help your productivity, their productivity, but has also been shown to be a powerful influencer encouraging them to stay loyal, reducing turnover costs, as well, of course, as attracting the right talent in the first place. So as ergonomists, our focus is on the person as a whole, not just the issues around their work life. We see people as human beings and not just as human resources. Throughout lockdown, we've seen thousands of people home working, and we've conducted them remotely worldwide. I've also been seeing throughout that a worrying increase in people working excessive hours and then struggling with the mental and physical health stressors, from burnout to back issues, which of course feed into each other. Physically, there's been a large increase in back and neck and shoulder issues, resulting in headaches, as well as wrist and lower back pain. Our statistics, which are reflected in others, are showing around 1 in 2 employees having issues, versus 1 in 4 in the office are having issues in the home versus when they're working in the office. The highest risks seem to be where people are living in smaller flats or in shared homes and end up working from the bedroom, sofa, developing issues from long-term awkward postures. And I'm still seeing instances 18 months later where people are still working in these types of environments. And one lady just last week had just ended up in A&E after working 20-hour days and working in a twisted posture. She only reached out to her employers after getting to a state where she could no longer work, and yet simple changes of the chair, the screen position, and with some ergonomics education could have prevented this. The cost to the business, she was a lawyer, will be now several weeks of lost work and probably costing thousands, when all it needed was a simple change at the beginning. It's also not enough just to provide equipment. That educational part on correct usage is key. Time and time again, I see pain simply caused from incorrect usage. So for this reason, ergonomics is a hugely effective way of looking after the well-being of your employees, and research has shown for it to deliver between a £3 and £10 return for every pound spent. So it's not only a duty, but a moral responsibility and good business sense to help employees optimize their health when working. Being proactive about back health is a straightforward investment to guard against hidden costs in the future. And that good posture, by the way, affects our ability to breathe correctly, improves our concentration levels, our focus, and our levels of self-belief. So it's all a win-win. Ergonomics education empowers your team to be proactive in their own health. And this is why ergonomics education is at the core of our services. We combine our interdisciplinary approach that is entirely human-centric, together with problem-solving skills to create a behavior change that will be adapted for long-term change. This is the only way to stop that vicious cycle. I so often see people who have been seeing a physiotherapist or an osteopath for years, and then just repeatedly undoing all of their good work as soon as they sit back down at the desk. They just get stuck in that loop. So we do this by looking at their back pain history, studying their patterns of behavior, observing their posture, their interaction with their workstation setup, and with our knowledge of biomechanics and psychology, provide solutions that are bespoke to their own particular circumstances. We look at body measurements, those anthropometrics, and whether their own setup suits their own particular height and body build. We are also looking for behaviors that may be exacerbating or increasing their risk of pain, from lower to upper back issues, RSI, sciatica, slip discs, you name it. It's really essential that we catch all of these really early, because there are changes that occur in our body if the pain continues for more than a few weeks. We want to catch it before it becomes chronic, because it's much easier to reverse those changes at that stage. Only yesterday, in fact, I saw a guy in an office who had ankylosing spondylosis, but the causes, which is inflammation in the body, but the causes of his pain that he'd been struggling with for over a year was simply down to the awkward postures he was adapting. And so with this education and a change of keyboard and mouse, it's all that was needed. And he should start to feel that difference within 2 weeks from our experience. So we point the way to solving issues, identifying across the maze of products, because there is a maze, any extra equipment that you might feel that they might need that is bespoke to their own requirements. Reducing that back pain is all about reducing the inflammation, preventing awkward static postures, and encouraging that regular movement through the day. Motion really is motion. So agile working really requires employers to learn how to adapt their working behaviors wherever they're required to work in this new type of working that we find ourselves in. But our job does become a little easier in the return to the workplace, where we can educate employees as a unit. We can do this through walkthroughs, as well as one-to-ones, workshops, online tools, etc. The office is also, of course, more standardized, but there's lots of new hot desking policies that I see being rolled out. So it's that educational piece again on how to quickly set it up to suit you, to prevent injury, that is so important. And of course, having that right equipment in the first place. And by that, I mean adjustable equipment that can be changed to suit you, whether you're 4'9" or 6'7". And I see quite a lot of really tall people. We have an amazing opportunity to be innovative in the workplace design, and it's proving to be the case that we really need to attract people in. People are a little reluctant still. So we've got this great opportunity to bring in the best from working at home, but not getting rid of the benefits of that traditional office. We just need to bring in the best of both worlds. The key is knowing which areas to design to maximum use, and adopt these around the different types of tasks and flow through the day. My real aim, my real ideal for the return to the office would be to have a rest room where you can have a power nap in the day, because this supports the needs of those whose sleep can get interrupted, such as new parents, those going through the menopause, recovery after illness, dealing with the long COVID that I've been seeing people struggling with, and of course, some respite for those lawyers working long nights that I also see. The point is we need to be purposeful, design for intent, and then let the magic happen by optimizing the employee's ability to perform at their best, whether individually or as a team. So that's me. And for any more information, you can find me at inspiredergonomics.com. And now I have the great pleasure of handing over to Susan Hunt, who is here to discuss No Woman Left Behind and how effective teams harness the power of the collective. Thank you.
That was awesome, Nichola. Thanks very much. Thanks for getting us kicked off. I actually have just received one of Nicola's chairs today, so I'm excited to try that out over the weekend. So I am Susan Hunt. I run a little virtual assistance company. I'm a remote business manager. I've done that for about 7 years now. I'm also a certified Kolbe consultant. What was that? So Kolbe is a form of psychometric assessment. So it helps people to find their natural talents and strengths and see how they can use those in the workplace and in their personal lives as well. And it's really from that expertise I'm going to talk to you today. I actually started out my working career trying to be Ally McBeal. I've just dated myself there. And the dream was that I'd be this hotshot lawyer working in the city firm. So I invested lots of time, energy, education, networking, extracurriculars, all of that good stuff. But really for a long time, deep down, I knew that that wasn't for me. Even as I started my law degree, I knew, no, this is not actually what I want to do, but I kept going anyway. So that's also, I guess, what qualifies me a little bit to speak to you as leaders and encourage you to look at your teams as a collective, as individuals. So your team members shouldn't just be numbers or cogs in the wheel, but we want to see the person. Now we know this, I'm stating the obvious here, right? But how do we actually go about doing this? What should we be considering to help us do this more effectively? Now, for me, I feel we need to understand a little bit more about how we work as humans, how our minds work, and how we operate. And I'm not saying you need to buy a couch and give each of your employees therapy, talk about their childhoods or anything like you can, but that's not what I'm saying. But thinking about and understanding some aspects of the mind and how they can really affect work, performance, and well-being. Yeah. So essentially, there are three parts of the mind. So you've got the cognitive, the part which controls the thinking, IQ, skills, learned behavior, that kind of thing. You've got the affective, which focuses on our feelings, emotions, values, our culture. And then you've got the cognitive, and that's the part of the mind that deals with our instincts, natural talents, and method of operating. Now, if we really want to create great teams, we need each individual to be operating in their sweet spot. I call it their sweet spot. And this is where they've got the right skills, so they're cognitively right match for the job they're doing. They've got the knowledge and experience. They're in a culture that aligns to their values. Yeah, so affectively, they're nurtured as well. And also they're able to use their natural talents that work with rather than against their grain or contrary to the way they naturally operate. So once we've got those three sort of in sync, that's where our employees can find their sweet spot. So we want to think about how we bake our teams. Now, why baking? Okay, so baking is very, very different to cooking. So cooking can be very fly by the seat of your pants, very spontaneous. What's in the cupboard? Dash of this, salt bay of that. And in the end, you can get something that tastes pretty good. You don't know how you did it. You don't remember the recipe, but it worked, right? It was a bit of a fluke. Now, baking is very, very different. It's quite an exact science, actually. You need scales, you need measuring spoons. If you have 1 teaspoon too much of bicarbonate of soda, you're going to have a problem, yeah? Each ingredient in your recipe has its place, even if it's just a few grams that you need to add in. So it's much more intentional than just cooking. And that's how we want to build our teams. We want to think about intentionality. What's the recipe? And that's where understanding these three parts of the mind really comes into play. So, we're often really pretty clear about the cognitive. So we know what hard skills we want candidates to bring. We know what degree we want them to have. We know what technical or vocational qualification we want them to have. But what about those other parts of the mind? Yeah. So what about the affective, for example? So what values do you want to bring on board? So that's got to be really clear from the outset. You don't start baking lemon meringue pie and then halfway decide, actually, I want chocolate cake. It's not going to work, yeah? Unless you like lemon chocolate meringue pie, I don't know. But there needs to be a very clear plan, and you need to be very clear and sure of your own personal and company values. And then you need to communicate those clearly. You need to communicate them right through from recruitment stage, onboarding, learning and development, how you reward and recognize individual team members. If your values are vague or constantly changing, that's going to cause stress, frustration, and a lot of miscommunication. And that does not make for a happy workforce. I think Nichola mentioned earlier, stress is one of the biggest causes of absenteeism and leaving jobs in the UK. I think something like 18 million days of work were lost in 2019 over stress and anxiety in the workplace. Yeah, so these are things we need to think about. So what about the cognitive part of the mind as well? So remember, that was about the way people approach a problem. It's about how they use their natural talents, their method of operating. Now, you're going to find that some people are going to approach and tackle problems in very different ways to others. So you're going to find that some people need more details and more data than others. I'm one of those. And you're going to find that some people just rely on the spoken word more so than the written word. Now, are you aware of those different cognitive needs of the individuals on your team? Or do you have one cookie cutter method and expect everyone to follow that? It might be the easier option to push everyone into the same mold, but perhaps you're not going to get the best results from your team if you're not going to see them as individuals. But allowing individual team members some freedom, some autonomy in the way they carry out their roles does reduce the level of stress in the workplace. So have a look at your methods and your processes and procedures and see if there are certain prescribed methods that are just unnecessary. Are there legacy processes that you're holding on to? Things we do because that's just the way we've always done them. Yeah, maybe we need a little bit of a shift to be more outcome focused, because some of those processes or methods, some members of your team might find quite restrictive. And if we don't look at their needs and understand that, we might be creating quite an oppressive workplace environment. Now, I was once told a story, don't ask me if it's true, but I think it makes the point a little bit. One Sunday morning, a woman was preparing the Sunday beef roasting joint. And as she'd always done, she cut off the ends of the joint and she put it in the oven. And her young child looked at her and said, "Mum, why have you cut off the ends?" And she stopped and she said, "I don't know, my mum always did it." So later on, wondering, she called her mother and she asked, "Mum, why do we cut off the ends of the beef roasting joint?" Her mum, in the same way, stopped and said, "I don't know, that's the way my mother did it." The next day, she visited her elderly mother and asked why they cut the ends off the beef when roasting it. And this elderly great-grandmother explained that at home, that in the home that she lived in when she was younger, first married, they had a very tiny oven. So a full beef joint wouldn't fit in it. So she'd cut off the ends and it would fit in. So it had a purpose back then for great-gran, but generations later, people were still doing the same thing because that's the way it's always been done, but it was unnecessary. So look at your business processes and think, are there processes, are there things that we are doing that are unnecessary? Are there things or ways that we work that go against the natural ways of working for certain individuals of our team? Are we causing them unnecessary stress? Yeah. So understanding how these different parts of the mind can affect different individuals' performance and well-being at work, we can be more intentional in terms of the way we recruit, and even further back than that in terms of the way we create and define roles, and make sure that the right people are in the right seats so that they can find their sweet spot. And there are lots of ways to do this. I'm just going to give you one simple one to try. You can try it when you get back to your desk or whatever. So look at your own role. Yeah, when you get off here, think about your own role, your own position. List absolutely every single task you have to complete over the course of a week, everything. Then ask yourself 2 questions. The first question is, does it need to be done? And remember, we're not thinking about is it the way it's always been done? We don't want to be cutting off the ends of our beef for no reason. Does it actually objectively need to be done? If it does need to be done, ask yourself, does it need to be done by me? If not, why are you doing it? Yeah. Is there a person on your team who's more suited to carrying out this particular task? Is there someone who may even enjoy it more, have more of a passion for doing that task than you do? So why don't they do it? Is it just because it's not quite in their job role on paper? That doesn't make sense. Yeah. It might even be more beneficial for you as a company to outsource it. Is there a piece of tech that does it quicker than you? If the answer is yes to these, then it's time to delegate either to a person or to a piece of software. Yeah. Now, imagine if you had other members of your team do the same exercise. It's very simple, but many teams I've worked with find it very powerful. Yeah. So remember those two questions. List out all your tasks. Ask yourself, does it need to be done? And does it need to be done by me? Now, I'm not naive. You're not going to find yourself in a position where everybody on your team is working perfectly in that sweet spot. But imagine the improvements to well-being and ultimately productivity when you have an awareness and a plan to get your team nearer to that goal. You and your team will be able to take over the world. Yeah. So what's the takeaway? Remember, you have a team of individuals. Take the time to understand each of them in terms of their whole minds, their cognitive need, their affective needs, their cognitive needs. Allow and celebrate those differences, especially in terms of the cognitive needs. Let people do things the way they need to do it to get the job done. And do what you can to have the right people in the right seats. And in that way, you leave no man or woman behind in the quest for creating your dream team. So thanks very much for your attention. I'm going to turn over to the wonderful Mindy Gibbins-Klein, who's going to help you turn your people into thought leaders.
Mindy, can you unmute?
Yes, much better. So, hello, and thank you to Susan for setting me up for that. I don't know if the term thought leader is one that you have used or that you are even familiar with. So I'll start with a very simple explanation of my work and why I am so interested in and passionate and really obsessed with thought leadership. So I run a brand called Real Thought Leaders, and the objective is to help individuals become thought leaders, to create their own thought leadership profile, to be recognized as thought leaders. And I also run a couple of companies helping executives and leaders to plan, write, and publish thought leading books, because that's a really great way to become a thought leader. So thought leadership in the traditional sense, and if you look it up on the internet, is sharing your best, most creative, most original ideas and getting recognized for those. And that takes courage, your biggest, boldest ideas. So you may be able to think of thought leaders in your organization and outside. And what about yourself? So this is an opportunity to understand thought leadership and the potential. And my belief is that you really want to have lots of thought leaders, many thought leaders in your organization. And here's what happens. In most organizations, people have their job description, and we've been listening to various instances of employee satisfaction or dissatisfaction. And much of that comes from just having a role and having it be quite prescriptive and fulfilling that role, but not feeling fulfilled. When you're fulfilling someone else's goal or role, and you're not fulfilling your own potential and your dreams, there's a disconnect. Every single person in the world has ideas. You've probably have got many. If you're listening to us right now, you probably have too many. And these ideas can create insights, and they have infinite possibilities for creating change in the world. However, much of the time it's stifled in the corporate world. And just becoming aware is a really great first step. So the benefit to the employee and increasing employee satisfaction is to create a thought leadership strategy, to make it a priority, to bake it in to the strategy of the company. And that way, every individual understands that it's not only allowed, but encouraged. And so they feel fulfilled, they shine, they have the ability to write and speak and network with confidence, representing themselves and the organization. So it is a bit of personal branding, whilst at the same time building the organization brand. And that's something that not many organizations even appreciate or understand is important, and fewer execute on that. So the really exciting thing is when you allow people to do that, it doesn't just benefit them. Obviously, if they feel fulfilled, that's a great thing. If they're happier at work, you will, we've already heard from Nichola, reduce absenteeism when all of the right elements are in place. So I'm adding the element of thought leadership to this discussion with my colleagues, because for me, this is something that is often an afterthought. You will have heard of the thought leader, the individual executive or the founder, or, which makes me a bit sad, the charismatic personality. But it's not just that elite group who can become thought leaders. So if you begin thinking about this in an inclusive way, then everybody wins. How does the organization win? So we understand, reducing absenteeism, improving employee satisfaction. What would it cost to replace your best people? What would it cost? Because that is the true cost. And it's your best people that I'm talking about. Your best people are the ones who really want to spread their wings and really want to shine. And they want to represent the organization well as feel like an individual, as Susan was saying. So you benefit in terms of retention, and you also benefit in other ways. When people are fulfilled, they feel like collaborating more with others. They don't feel threatened. They're not just looking after themselves or looking for the next job. They can bring more of themselves to work. The organization can benefit because you end up getting more out of more people. You can share the work or the fun, however you look at it. You can build the buzz together with more people out there representing the business. So in this case, we don't have less is more. I say more is more. And what we want is for people to be writing articles, writing blogs, maybe books, recording podcasts, doing videos, doing speaking engagements. And every time they go out networking with their company badge on or their company business card, they're representing the business in that light and able to share their biggest and best and boldest, most creative, most exciting, original, even groundbreaking ideas. Does that sound a bit radical? Yes, the organizations I've worked with have been hesitant, to put it mildly, because this is something extra. This is usually not part of the strategy, but it is so well worth it. So I was very proud when I worked in corporate to have almost a perfect employee satisfaction and retention score, because this is valuing your people. How do you do it? Well, you create the strategy, as I've been saying. You make it very clear and share that strategy internally, even externally. This can become a USP, that we are inclusive in the sense that we're building more thought leaders. And that sounds like a good thing, because it is. And you will actually need to work with the line managers, because it's fine if you run a large team and you don't know the individual skills and interests and ideas and opinions of every single person. You may need help with this to identify them and ensure that you're getting the return on that investment for each person. And I don't mean that in a crude or transactional sense. I mean the emotional investment and the people first investment. So the boldest companies, the best companies that I've seen take this to the market have in fact put it into people's personal development plans. Again, not only allowing them to take time and write and speak and develop content and thought leading ideas, not only allowing it, but encouraging it. And then they become seen as a thought leading organization. And I just find that phrase really funny, because an organization doesn't have thoughts. So it's very amusing when I hear Apple is a thought leader. No, Apple happens to have thought leading individuals at different levels. And that's what you see, the cumulative effect, the overall effect is that the organization rises. So this is what's possible. And this is what I recommend. But of course, you need to identify who has what interests, and in some larger organizations, they need to run the messaging past legal or other departments. That's fine. It shouldn't stop people creating content that they're proud of. So I've stopped using the term, I've not stopped, I've used the term thought leadership quite a lot today, but actually it's about thoughtful leadership. This is one of my latest books, and I personally think it's much more important to take this thoughtful approach to thought leadership. It's not about churning stuff out. It's not about just having more articles and more podcasts and more content out there. Done strategically, it's content that really packs a punch, that disruptive, original, exciting, new. I mean, that's what people are always saying. Is there anything new? Is there anything original? Absolutely. And some of your undiscovered thought leaders in the business are just the ones to bring that out, to craft it, package it up, and send it out into the world in a very exciting way. I could talk about this forever. Not today, you'll be happy to know. And I'm very happy to chat with anybody after this, and I'm very accessible online. Just find me. If you spell my name right, we'll be good. You need to give people the time and space to create their content. So that's part of encouraging. You really do need to show them that it's not just lip service. So thank you for everybody who's used all my best phrases today already, Nichola and Susan. We're all saying the same thing: value the individual, and the individuals will create a valuable team. I just have one more suggestion for you. If you like this, because there isn't that much time today, and all 5 of us have really, really exciting content to present to you, find me on LinkedIn. I have 2 resources which you can have. I'd be delighted to share them with you. One is an article called Creating a Culture of Thought Leadership in Your Organization. And that came out several years ago for Managing Partner, I believe. And you can have that. And my latest ebook on this topic is called Thoughtful Leadership in a Digital World. And it is all about inclusive, thoughtful leadership and how to bring people at every level into this thought leadership strategy that you're about to create. So that's me. I'm Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I work with real thought leaders, and I'm absolutely delighted to present my colleague who will share the next bit with you, and that's Jane Piper. Over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Mindy. Thanks so much for that. It's great to hear about thought leaders, and I'm not sure I should call myself a thought leader, but I have worked with Mindy to help clarify my ideas in a book called Focus in the Age of Distraction. So just to give you a little bit about my background, I am an organizational psychologist, and I work with organizations and people to help smart people work smarter by maximizing their brain power and trying to reduce organizational drag. We have now been talking for around about, what's it been now, 30 minutes or so. So since I talk about energy and brain power, I thought, I wonder if you want a quick shift in your energy and brain power. And so I'm going to suggest that if you've got a bit of time to try this exercise, you've got 2 hands like that, try putting one wrist up like that and one finger up like that, and then switching it so the other finger goes up and the other thumb. So you see what I'm doing? How easy is that? Oh, even I can't get it right very easily. So you see how that's shifting your brain power up, and that's what I like to do, is help people to just sort of shift ideas and cogs. I can see some people struggling there. So keep practicing that. It's amazing how automatic it does become after a while. I need to practice it myself, as you can see. But what I want to think about, that was something new you were trying. Sounds very simple. You're very used to going like this, and you're perhaps very used to going like that, but trying to do the two together is quite challenging. And I don't think we're going back to anything that people keep calling it the new normal, but as one of our dear colleagues calls it, it's actually going to be a new different. And that's because we're not going to go back to the office 5 days a week. And this is going to create a challenge about how we work together effectively. I've been talking to my clients, and in fact, I had a meeting at one of my clients' offices earlier this week. One of my clients, Roche, and they have these beautiful buildings in Basel. It's the tallest tower in Basel. It's a 41-story building. It was built about 2 or 3 years ago, and they're extremely proud of this building. It's usually a bustling, busy place. 2,000 people would pre-COVID work there. I went there on Wednesday and there were 10 to 15 people on the floor where you could have 160 people on the floor. So I can see, not just hear my clients talking about it, that people are not coming back to the office in droves. There's a few back now, a few more might come back. Some people are hoping that later more will come back, but I think that we're looking at a very different way of working in the future, where we will have people who some will be in the office and some will be remote. And that is going to be more of a challenge than when you had everybody remote, or pre-COVID you had everybody who was pretty much in the same room. Now, as a leader, you're going to have the situation where you're not seeing people as frequently, but also the team members are not seeing themselves as frequently. Anybody who's new over the COVID times will know how difficult it has been to try and adapt and fit into a team. It has been working, but I think that the seams are creaking as we move on, as we've had new teams, as teams are trying to work together. We've learned a lot from Susan and Mindy about getting the unique perspective and ideas from each of our team members. But it's when team members come together that we get those really thoughts bouncing off each other and that innovation. But we need to be much more intentional about how we are going to create, how we communicate and we collaborate to be effective in the hybrid team era. The risk is that we only hear the ideas and opinions from people in the room, and we overlook those people we're not seeing very often. The challenge is that we're going to miss out on those people, unique perspectives and visions that can be brought there. And I'm sure there's possibly a couple of you thinking, well, look, I'm just going to order all my people back to the office 5 days a week, or I'm going to tell them all to come in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, normal times, things like that. And then this won't be a problem. I think you face a huge risk if you would do that you would lose your good people and to your competitors. And I believe that is because what we're seeing is that people don't want to come back to the office, and so they will resign if they're forced to and go and work for a company that does offer that flexibility. So a UK study of 1,000 people showed that 1 in 4 people would resign if they were forced back to the office, and a US study was nearly as high as 1 in 2 people. So if you can afford to lose 25% or 50% of your workforce by forcing them back to that office, then go right ahead. But if you can't, then here's some tips about how we can be much more intentional about getting our teams to communicate and collaborate in a hybrid era. I'm going to talk about meetings, because meetings is how we do things in a lot of the knowledge work era, where we're getting ideas and innovation. And let's be perfectly honest, meetings were pretty rubbish prior to COVID. For years, companies hired smart people, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and then they spend most of their time in meetings or answering emails. We could do so much better on how we communicate and collaborate even prior to COVID. I don't know if you want to drop in the chat how many hours a week that you're sort of on meetings. That would be interesting statistic to share. To make hybrid meetings work, I think you need to look at these 5 Ps. purpose, participants, product, process, and proximity bias. So the first P that we're going to look at is purpose. Your meeting, you have to be very clear on why you are gathering together. Is it to inspire people? Is it to share ideas? It has to be a conversation or a dialogue. Otherwise, you could watch a video recording of you talking, or you could read a status report. So why are you really gathering? Participants, have you got the right people in the room or in the virtual room to communicate together? So often we invite people, especially in these corporate environments, there's this disease that we would seem rude if we left somebody off a meeting. Think about you doing it a favor. Get the right people in there who can make the decisions, who can contribute good ideas. Product, be very, very clear on what the outcomes and goals are. What people's role is when they are in the meeting. I like a process called team alignment mapping. I've worked with some of my clients where we try and work at understanding the big picture and then detail how people's roles fit into that picture. Gives people a real sense of ownership, and that pre-COVID, but definitely now in a hybrid team where there's going to be more challenges with communication, is such an important thing to do. Finally, process. I mean, we all know about agendas and taking minutes. It's, you know, it's part of the way we do things. I mean, let's be honest, a bit of meeting hygiene, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about now when we do, we need to think about meetings as being a workshop and running and designing it like a workshop. If you get a facilitator to come in, I hope if you're hiring a good facilitator, they don't just sit a bunch of people and expect them to discuss. They have ways to help people brainstorm, mind map, word association to come up with creative ideas, problem solving and different ways of analyzing a problem to come up with a decision. And we need to move our meetings on beyond having a good agenda and nice minutes taken. And finally, I want to talk about proximity bias as the fifth P. Proximity bias is basically, it's easier to remember people or things or anything which is more recent, when you've seen them, when they come to mind. So they will be the people that you would choose for a plum project, or you would appoint to a new role when somebody leaves, they would come to mind. But who is more likely to come back to the office? My prediction, it's likely more to be the younger people, the more ambitious people, because they want to be seen. And it's likely to disadvantage working parents. People who have further to commute from the office may have lower incomes because they're commuting further and not living in swanky central London places. So you could be creating the double whammy where you are disadvantaging groups already disadvantaged, low income, working parents, women, and keeping them further away from the opportunities through this proximity bias. So we need to be a lot more intentional when we are collaborating and communicating, that you're involving these people and bringing these people in, and not just thinking about the people who are directly in front of us. One way I would like to suggest of doing this is a team agreement. And team agreements are not new. As I said, we could have been doing meetings a lot better. We tended to understand how they were done in the old world and just get on with it. But a team agreement is a template that helps a team get together and discuss those issues, how to communicate and collaborate, when and how you will meet, and what's the purpose of meeting. What about workload and well-being? How do you raise those issues when you've got too much workload and it's affecting your well-being, as Nichola was mentioning, a lot of those issues. And how do you find time to focus, which is my pet thing, that we give people, smart people, time to actually do that smart brain work, not just have them tied up in meetings and answering emails. I'd suggest to get a good team meeting with your hybrid team now, run a workshop and intentionally agree on those issues so that we can move into a hybrid way of working rather than come up with just seeing how it's done. It will be a learning experience. I mean, if anybody says they're an expert on hybrid working, I would sort of go, what? I mean, hybrid working is quite new. There are teams which have worked a lot in remote, and we can learn from them. But basically, it's experimental trial and error. But I think a team agreement of how you will work together is a good way and place to start to get your team working effectively in a hybrid era. I'm going to drop in a chat if you would like to. You can go to my website and download an example team agreement, a template that you can use with your team to agree a team agreement, because I believe that will help you work more effectively in a hybrid era. I'm now going to hand over to Kate, who is going to, I'll leave Kate to explain what she's going to talk about. It's about asking good questions and dealing with difficult conversations.
Thank you so much, Jane. Hello, everybody. My name is Kate Faragher. That's me there. I am a communication consultant. Hopefully that'll come up in a sec. I've been a trainer, coach and facilitator for nearly 21 years. Oh my gosh. And I work across 4 different sectors, the politics, tech, humanitarian aid and creative industries. And I also do 3 things. I teach people how to present, to communicate and to influence. And so what I'm going to do is to distill some key points today about how you can have those difficult conversations. It's going to be very practical. So I want you to get your different head on, so you've got your fingers going. And what I want us to think about is actually, how can we make sure that that woman that Nichola was talking about will tell you that she's got back pain before it gets chronic, that you know, that somebody talks about why they're chopping off different bits of the beef so that they feel comfortable to actually share what the backstory is, and there's space to have those conversations. And then also that, you know, those people that do want to be a thought leader, that they're actually feeling as if they can put their hand up and say, listen, this is where I want to go. And that if they're having meetings where, yes, they're not clear on purpose, completely agree with that. But another part of what I teach is about people having their unconscious bias really spotlighted. We need to make sure we have safe places with our meetings that are innovative. And I'm going to show you a few ways to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my Okio cam and we're going to play a little bit. So this is my little hand here. What I'm going to explain to you is that when we have difficult conversations, sometimes it's quite difficult to know whether we should be assertive or not, right? And when we're assertive, we generally don't want to be aggressive, or we don't want to be passive. We ideally want this assertive win-win situation. Now, generally with assertiveness, what you want to do is being really clear. You want to be really clear and tell them what you want to do. You need to know your rights, you need to know your needs, and you need to tell people what to do. But the thing is, when you're having a tricky conversation with somebody, one that's come up many, many years ago was when a manager that I was working with had to tell their client, had to tell one of their staff that they had to start using deodorant. Now, how did they go about it? They weren't quite sure. The way that one person suggested they do it is they just sort of hand them and go, hey, can you start using this, please? But that is generally not the best way to do it. What you need to do is you need to think about being a little bit more influential. And when you think about influence, there's, I think it was Lloyd George that said, bait the hook to suit the fish. But I quite like the idea of create the key that unlocks the potential, unlocks the door. So ideally what you want to do is you want to think about influencing that individual to get to the right answer, right? To get to not the right answer, you want them to get to a place where you're encouraging them to open up, encouraging them to speak, right? And that means that you might need to ask them a little bit more. You might need to ask them some questions. And in order to be able to know which one to do, you need to have that emotional intelligence to do it. And that's tricky because emotional intelligence requires quite a lot of understanding of the other person. So let's look at these things, right? Because when we're actually talking to somebody, what are the barriers? Like, why is it difficult to have these conversations? What is it about the approach that we need to think about? Well, if you think of the person that you want to have that difficult conversation with, right? The reason that they will find it uncomfortable and therefore maybe be a bit more defensive, or might not be as open with you, or not give you the information that you need, or be very defensive about the feedback, whatever the conversation, or they might not want to tell you about some of their well-being issues that they're having because they're worried about their career or whatever. So there's underlying issues, right? Generally, you can divide them into three things, right? These people, they're worried about their emotions and their feelings, right? And they've got lots of them, red ones, green ones, all sorts of different feelings. They've also got different beliefs and assumptions, right? So that means that they might assume that by bringing you in to have a conversation with them, they might assume that you're not happy with their performance, or they might assume they're going to get told off, or they might assume that they're not going to get the best outcome from the meeting. There's another part of it, which is their identity and their opinion of themselves. And if you are really harsh and verging towards more aggressive than passive, or more aggressive than assertive, then it means they might feel defensive again. That they might feel as if they're not able to uncover some of the things that would be good for them to discuss. So the reason that conversations can be difficult to have is because of all of these different things. However, I believe, I really do believe that if you can have a really difficult conversation with somebody, and it's a really safe place to have it, you get a quality conversation out of it. And out of those quality conversations comes great teamwork. If you look at Patrick Lencioni, actually, and how to have effective teams, one of them is the ability to have conflict conversations. So you need to be comfortable with them. So let's look at 8 ways that you can have those conflict conversations, right? So the first one, my OcuCam, the first one is how to start that conversation, right? So how you start it is you have to start thinking about a little bit of what Jane was talking about, this kind of prep. You need to think about having some templates, or Jane, do you want to pop in? What did you call yours? The one that they can...
The team agreement.
The team agreement. So these team agreements or templates can be really great. Now, if you want to go back to being assertive, when you're assertive, you want to set things up right at the beginning, right? Because if you're halfway through, a really difficult project, you need to sort of have a starting point where you say, right, we're going to contract how we're going to make this work. Templates, team agreements, and also sort of ways of working to have difficult conversations. So for example, I sometimes talk to my clients about having well-being plans. What would happen what happens to you when you're feeling stressed? Do you talk more? Do you talk less? Do you pull back? Or do you, what actually happens, so we can preempt it with a well-being template, well-being plan? Now, if they know that these are the questions that are coming up, if they know that everybody's going to have these questions, then it means that they'll feel much more comfortable and they won't be challenged by it. So have some templates or ask some questions, some really great questions. Start with TEDS, tell me, explain, describe, or show. So that's how to start conversations. Lots more in there, but that's a good starting point. Get them talking, find out what they want. Now, it's about navigating their emotions, making sure that they feel comfortable or in a safe space. Now, sometimes people want to be pushed, and other times people want support. And the emotional intelligence bit here, it's about deciding whether they need to be pushed or they need support. Now, that will depend on whether they are towards people, towards goals, towards things, or whether they are away from. Now, generally, we're all a little mix of both. So it might depend on the topic they're talking about, or the topic you're going to be talking about in your difficult conversation, which way they'd want to go. So have a little think about how to navigate their emotions, but you also have to navigate yours. Because if you are feeling anxious, or you are feeling that it's all about you, then what will happen is they'll pick it up. You need to be able to create that space for them where you can make sure that if there are emotions that happen during that time, that you can hold them well enough for them. And that just means listening, really listening with an open heart. Because sometimes if people feel that they are misunderstood, they'll feel judged. And so if they feel judged, they won't open up. And so we need to try to understand them. But by understanding them, we've also got to make sure that we understand that some people don't get the whole picture sometimes. And we've got to be mindful of that and compassionate about that. So I would say be compassionate about where they are at in their journey. And you have to navigate both their triggers, because they might misunderstand what you're saying and you might not be heard well. You need to make sure that you take responsibility for what is being said. So make sure that you're not saying, well, I'm right, you're wrong, but making sure that they are hearing that you are, that your intention is good and that are trying to understand the language that you're using. The next one, number 5, is about noticing any judgment that you might have. And this is really about scanning your emotions while you're having conversations. If you can, you get it's easier over time, but then you can kind of go, well, I'm judgmental about this, or I can feel a bias coming up. So I've got to choose not to be biased. And it might sound really simple, but before you go into a meeting and just say, I know I am biased about X, I am going to choose not to be, then it's amazing. They've actually done loads of research into this. We know that you actually reduce your bias by about 70%. So make sure that you notice if you've got any judgments as well. And there are times, as we all know, I'm sure we've all been there, where people, I work in politics, remember, so there are some people with hidden agendas. And sometimes we've got to make sure that that we try to understand their agenda, their hidden agendas. Now, this is why it might take some conversations more than one go, right? You've got to make sure you've got the templates, that you follow through them, but you've also got to make sure that you are creating these safe places of no judgment, no judgment, no hammers. You've got to make sure that these are safe places so that you can get them out of their box. You can make sure that you can kind of they feel safe enough to come out and give you a little bit of a tidbit about, why they're hiding that agenda. And the best way I think about it is if you go in with your little clipboard and trying to sort of do everything correctly, then sometimes we lose that human element. It goes back to a little bit what Jane was talking about. In fact, what we've all been talking about is intentionality, but it's also about listening, really, truly listening beyond what they're saying, looking at their body language, looking at what they're thinking about. And I think that the way that we listen is we listen without ego. If we truly try to understand, we will be able to uncover how to have that better conversation. And the last thing to finish conversations is it's really good to summarize the actions going forward. So I have a little summary. So I would suggest a little bit of an overview. There's so much into how to have difficult conversations, but hopefully you've picked up 1 or 2 things. But I would suggest that you create a conversation plan, keep the conversations going, make sure you have some templates, and start everybody talking about the difficult things on a regular basis. So I just want to say thank you so much for you all to be here. It's been really exciting to share the stage with these amazing women. And I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think, can somebody put up the original list, or will I do it? Yeah, let me do it. So that's who we all are. Have I got it? There we go. Can you see it now? So I'm Kate Faragher. I'm a change facilitator. Jane Piper is an organization psychologist. Mindy Gibbins-Klein is a leadership strategist and thought leader and helps you write brilliant books. Susan Hunt, business manager, and Nichola Adams, an ergonomist. We have hopefully given you some amazing little tidbits about how to create effective teams. And I would say, make sure you sit up straight, make sure you really look for things with your back. I think, Nichola, from what I heard, make sure that we think about how our teams work. Think about getting your team to be a thought leader and have those great conversations with, as Jane said, with intentionality. We hope that you'll connect with us all online, on LinkedIn and all the various places that we are, and we look forward to seeing you again.